It was a quiet morning in New York City when Wendy Williams walked into the courtroom, her heels clicking against the cold, marble floors. The usual media frenzy surrounding her every move had escalated to new heights, and the air was thick with anticipation. Her face was a mask of determination, but those who knew her well could see the faint traces of anxiety in her eyes. Today wasn't just another day for Wendy. Today, everything would change. The courtroom was packed, with reporters scribbling furiously and cameras flashing, all aimed at the woman who had become a lightning rod for controversy. Wendy had always been known for speaking her mind, no matter the cost, but no one had expected what was about to unfold. As the judge took his seat and the proceedings began, Wendy's lawyer stood up, asking the court for permission to call her to the stand. A hush fell over the room. Everyone knew Wendy was about to take the spotlight, but no one could have predicted what would happen next. Wendy took the stand, her back straight, her voice steady. But then, as she began to speak, the room held its collective breath. "I've been quiet for too long, but today, I'm going to say what I've been holding onto for years," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. She paused, scanning the room, her eyes locking with the crowd of spectators, her tone serious. "I'm here to tell you about the truth, about Diddy, Jay-Z, and Oprah. Yes, you heard me right. The truth about everything that's been hidden from the public eye for so long." Gasps filled the room. Reporters exchanged incredulous glances, and even the judge seemed taken aback by the boldness of her statement. Wendy had just named 3 of the biggest names in entertainment, and no one could quite believe what they were hearing. Allegedly, her statements could shake the very foundation of the industry. The courtroom erupted into chaos, but Wendy remained calm. She looked straight ahead, unflinching. "What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about these icons was a lie? What if I told you that they're not the people you think they are?" Wendy's voice echoed in the courtroom, and for a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. The room was alive with whispers. What if Wendy Williams actually said this, people murmured. What if everything she claimed was true? The idea was shocking, but given her reputation for being unafraid to speak her mind, it was impossible to dismiss entirely. Many fans believe that Wendy has always been the one to stir the pot, to shake things up. But today, it's not just gossip. "This is bigger than anyone could have imagined," a reporter whispered to a colleague. As Wendy continued, she revealed names and details that only insiders would have known, details that seemed impossible to have come from someone outside the circle. She spoke of the hidden dealings, the power struggles, and the manipulation that shaped the careers of some of the most powerful figures in entertainment. Allegedly, Oprah may have played a bigger role in shaping the public narrative around her than anyone ever thought, Wendy continued. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. She didn't stop there. "And Jay-Z? What if I told you that there's more to his empire than you could ever imagine? That the rise to power wasn't as smooth as everyone thinks? That the road to the top was paved with deals and sacrifices?" The shockwaves were felt beyond the courtroom. Wendy wasn't just making accusations, she was planting seeds of doubt that would soon spread across the media landscape. Her words were like a match to a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. But Wendy wasn't finished. Her next words hit like a hammer to the chest. "Diddy? What if I told you that he's not the businessman you think he is? What if I told you he's been hiding something so big, so controversial, that it could ruin his entire career?" The audience was stunned into silence. Even the courtroom reporters couldn't keep up with the rapid-fire revelations. The idea that Wendy was laying it all out, naming names and challenging the status quo, was both thrilling and terrifying. She was playing with fire, and everyone knew it. "I've been quiet for too long," Wendy said, her voice now filled with emotion. "But these secrets are too big to keep buried any longer. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for the world to know the truth." The room was electric with tension. Everyone knew this was no ordinary day in court. Wendy Williams had just turned the entertainment world upside down with a single confession. But what was the truth? Was she telling the whole story, or was this just another chapter in the endless saga of Hollywood rumors? The media frenzy exploded. Social media was flooded with hashtags, and headlines popped up on every news outlet across the country. The questions were endless: was Wendy Williams truly revealing the truth? Or was this just another calculated attempt to get attention? But amid all the chaos, one thing was clear: the industry would never be the same. Wendy's confession had ignited a firestorm that no one could control. And it had only just begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning, the reporter on the live feed urged. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? And with that, the stage was set for a battle of truths, lies, and power. The world was watching, and Wendy Williams had just dropped a bombshell that no one saw coming. Wendy Williams wasn't always the loud, unapologetic media mogul that everyone knew. She didn't start her career as the brash talk show host that made headlines with every word. No, Wendy's journey was far from glamorous, and it was anything but easy. In fact, it was her struggles that shaped her into the woman she was today. Born in Asbury Park, New Jersey, Wendy had big dreams from an early age. She was always a bit different from the other kids, ambitious, driven, and with a sharp mind that made her stand out. But she didn't grow up with a silver spoon in her mouth. Wendy's family wasn't rich, and her childhood wasn't one of privilege. Her mother, a teacher, and her father, a police officer, worked hard to provide for her and her siblings. Wendy admired their resilience, but she also knew she wanted something more. She wasn't satisfied with just getting by, she wanted to conquer the world. As a teenager, Wendy developed an obsession with the entertainment industry. She watched talk shows religiously, idolized celebrities, and dreamed of a life in front of the camera. But getting there wasn't easy. Her road to fame wasn't paved with invitations to glamorous parties or lucky breaks. No, Wendy had to work her way up from the bottom. After graduating from Northeastern University with a degree in communications, Wendy landed her first job in radio, working as an intern at a local station in New York City. It was a grind. She worked long hours, made little money, and did everything from fetching coffee to running errands for the on-air personalities. But she was determined. She knew that every step she took, no matter how small, was bringing her closer to the dream she'd nurtured for so long. Wendy's breakthrough came when she became the host of her own radio show. Her voice, bold and unfiltered, quickly gained attention. She didn't hold back, whether she was discussing celebrity gossip, sharing her personal opinions, or confronting uncomfortable truths about the entertainment industry. She became known for her no-holds-barred approach, a refreshing change from the polished, cookie-cutter personalities that dominated the airwaves. Wendy wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and that's what made her stand out. But as her career soared, so did the tensions. Wendy's candidness and willingness to speak openly about the rich and powerful didn't sit well with everyone. She made a name for herself by exposing the dirt that others were too afraid to touch. Rumors suggested that her success came with a price: powerful enemies who didn't appreciate her willingness to push boundaries. One of those enemies was Oprah Winfrey, a woman Wendy had always admired but whom she would come to have a rocky relationship with. Wendy had always viewed Oprah as a queen of the entertainment world, someone whose empire was built on trust, respect, and power. But that respect began to erode when Wendy's biting commentary on Oprah's relationships and business dealings started to make headlines. Many fans believed that Wendy's critiques of Oprah were driven by jealousy. After all, Oprah was a media mogul who had achieved legendary status. But Wendy wasn't just jealous, she was deeply disillusioned. To her, Oprah's perfect image seemed like a facade, a well-crafted mask that hid the real woman behind it. And when Wendy started questioning that mask, the fallout was inevitable. Things took a darker turn when Wendy's comments about Diddy and Jay-Z started gaining attention. Both of these men were titans in the music and entertainment industries: Diddy, the mogul behind Bad Boy Records, and Jay-Z, the rapper-turned-business tycoon. They were larger-than-life figures, admired by millions. But to Wendy, they were symbols of the very industry she had come to criticize so fiercely. Wendy's relationship with Diddy was complicated. They had crossed paths countless times, and there was always an underlying tension between them. Diddy was known for his charm and charisma, but Wendy had never been one to be swayed by a smile or a smooth talker. She saw through the carefully crafted image. Diddy, in Wendy's eyes, was a master manipulator, someone who knew how to play the game, make deals, and control narratives. But Wendy wasn't afraid to challenge him when she saw something she didn't like. And when she started digging into his past, things began to unravel. As for Jay-Z, Wendy had been one of the first to call out his rise to fame. She wasn't buying the rags to riches narrative that the media had spun about him. What if Jay-Z's success wasn't as organic as it seems, she asked during a radio broadcast years ago. Her comment sent shockwaves through the hip-hop world, and while some fans dismissed her as just another gossipmonger, others began to question whether there was some truth to what Wendy was saying. Was Jay-Z's rise to power really as clean as it appeared? Wendy's voice had become a force in the entertainment world, and with that power came backlash. It wasn't just her public feuds with celebrities that made her a target, it was her refusal to be intimidated. She wasn't willing to play by the unwritten rules of the industry. She wasn't interested in pandering to the stars or protecting their image. Wendy was on a mission to expose the truth, no matter who it hurt. And that's where things started to get tricky. When Wendy transitioned to her talk show, The Wendy Williams Show, she already had a reputation. She wasn't just another TV personality, she was a force to be reckoned with. She tackled the juiciest celebrity gossip, the most scandalous rumors, and the darkest secrets of Hollywood. But with each bombshell, she was making more enemies. The more she exposed, the more people tried to silence her. Her relationships with Diddy, Jay-Z, and Oprah were more complicated than anyone could have imagined. There were times when Wendy thought she could repair the rift with Oprah, or that Diddy would come around and understand her perspective. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized that some truths were better left buried. And the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. In her mind, there was no turning back now. She had already stepped into a world of power, manipulation, and secrecy. And the more she learned, the more she felt compelled to speak out. By the time she entered the courtroom to drop her bombshell, Wendy Williams had already spent years battling against the forces she was about to expose. The people she was about to name weren't just celebrities, they were the very architects of the system she had spent her career dissecting. But it was no longer about fame or fortune. It was about survival. Wendy had learned too much to stay silent, and she was willing to risk everything for the truth. Allegedly, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than anyone realizes, Wendy said to herself as she prepared for the moment that would change everything. What if exposing these secrets was the only way to finally break free from the industry's iron grip? And so, with the world watching, Wendy Williams made the choice that would change her life forever. Wendy Williams had never been one to back down from a fight. Throughout her career, she had faced her fair share of criticism, backlash, and even personal struggles. But nothing had prepared her for the storm she was about to unleash with her court testimony. The moment she named Diddy, Jay-Z, and Oprah, she didn't just open a can of worms, she set off a chain of events that would spiral out of control in ways she could never have imagined. The media frenzy surrounding her statement was unlike anything Wendy had ever experienced. News outlets were scrambling to get their hands on every detail, every shred of information they could find. Social media exploded with wild theories and rumors. What if Wendy Williams actually said this, was the question on everyone's lips, with hashtags like #WendyExposed and #HollywoodSecrets trending worldwide. Wendy's phone rang non-stop for days after the courtroom bombshell. Her friends, colleagues, and even former enemies reached out to her, wondering what had possessed her to make such a bold and dangerous move. Most of them were concerned for her safety, worried that she had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But Wendy was undeterred. She had always been a fighter, and she wasn't about to back down now. In fact, The more people tried to silence her, the more determined she became to speak the truth. She had made it clear in the courtroom that she was done hiding behind the mask of politeness and decorum that the industry expected. The truth was out, and she wasn't going to let anyone sweep it under the rug. However, the fallout from Wendy's revelation wasn't just about media attention. The real impact was far more personal. The relationships she had spent years cultivating, the friendships and alliances she had built, were now under intense scrutiny. Wendy wasn't just challenging the public image of three of the most powerful figures in entertainment, she was questioning the very foundations of the system that had allowed them to rise to such heights. The first sign of trouble came when Diddy's team reached out to Wendy's publicist. The call was calm, almost cordial, but there was an undeniable undercurrent of tension. "Wendy, we'd like to talk. Let's keep things professional," the representative said. It wasn't an offer to collaborate or smooth things over, it was a veiled warning. Wendy knew exactly what they were doing. Diddy's empire wasn't built on kindness and generosity, it was built on control, manipulation, and secrecy. The man who had risen from the streets of Harlem to become one of the most powerful men in music wasn't going to let a talk show host expose the cracks in his empire without a fight. The next day, Wendy received a cryptic message from a source close to Jay-Z. It was a brief note, but it sent a chill down her spine. "You've made a powerful enemy. Think about your next move carefully." Wendy wasn't sure what to make of it, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Jay-Z's camp was already strategizing how to handle the situation. Jay-Z was a man of few words, but when he did speak, it was calculated and strategic. His empire had survived scandals before, but this was different. Wendy wasn't just a media personality with an opinion, she was a threat to everything he had built. Then came Oprah. Wendy had always respected Oprah, despite their differences. But when Wendy's comments about Oprah's carefully curated public persona hit the airwaves, the response was swift and merciless. Oprah's team immediately issued a statement condemning Wendy's remarks, calling them reckless and unsubstantiated. Oprah herself remained silent, but her silence spoke volumes. Wendy knew that Oprah's influence could be felt everywhere, from the media to politics to the very fabric of Hollywood. If Oprah decided to go after her, it would be like battling a tidal wave. The tension in the air was palpable. Wendy had become the center of a media storm, but it was no longer just about the gossip, it was about power. She had crossed a line that even the most fearless celebrities would hesitate to approach. She had dared to expose the hidden world of entertainment, to lift the veil on the carefully constructed images of the industry's biggest stars. And in doing so, she had made herself a target. But Wendy wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. The more they tried to intimidate her, the more she dug her heels in. She spent hours in her office, reading through old interviews, researching past scandals, and connecting the dots between Diddy, Jay-Z, and Oprah. She wasn't just a talk show host anymore, she was a journalist, an investigator, and a whistleblower. She had uncovered something so big, so controversial, that it could bring the entire entertainment industry to its knees. And it wasn't just the celebrities she had named who were on edge. Wendy had been in the industry long enough to know that there were powerful forces behind the scenes, agents, managers, publicists, and executives, who pulled the strings from behind closed doors. She had made enemies of these people, too, and they weren't going to let her expose the system they had spent decades building without a fight. For the first time in her career, Wendy found herself looking over her shoulder. She had made enemies in high places, and she knew that in an industry like Hollywood, enemies weren't just dangerous, they were deadly. But there was no turning back now. Wendy was in too deep, and she knew that the only way out was to keep going forward. As the days passed, Wendy's phone continued to buzz with messages from all sides. Some were threats, some were offers, and some were pleas for her to reconsider. But Wendy had a singular focus now, the truth. She wasn't going to let herself be silenced by fear, by money, or by the power of the people she had called out. This was bigger than her, it was about exposing the reality of an industry that had built its empire on deception. But with each passing day, the stakes grew higher. Wendy had started something, and now she would have to finish it, no matter the cost. The phone calls kept coming, each one a reminder of how far Wendy Williams had gone in her pursuit of the truth. In the days following her courtroom confession, Wendy found herself thrust into an unexpected journey, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the world of entertainment, and about herself. It wasn't just about media attention anymore. It was about survival. Wendy had stepped into a storm, and now there was no way out. The very people she had once admired, Diddy, Jay-Z, Oprah, were not only trying to silence her, but they were pulling strings that Wendy could no longer ignore. They were a web of influence that extended beyond Hollywood, into politics, media, and even law enforcement. But Wendy wasn't the type to back down, especially not now. She had dug too deep and exposed too much for anyone to stop her. Wendy's days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and planning. She had never been more focused in her life. It was almost as if the more she uncovered, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. She began connecting dots that stretched far beyond the high-profile figures she had named. The deeper she went, the more she realized that this wasn't just about celebrity gossip. It was about systemic corruption. A hidden world that few dared to acknowledge, let alone expose. But she wasn't doing this alone. There were a few people who stood by her, offering support when it seemed like the world was turning against her. Her longtime friend and fellow journalist, Lisa, was one of them. Lisa had worked with Wendy on countless projects over the years, but now, she was more than just a colleague, she was Wendy's ally in the fight of her life. One late evening, after a particularly grueling day of interviews and phone calls, Wendy sat down with Lisa in her office. The tension in the air was thick, but there was also a sense of determination. Wendy needed to know that she wasn't alone in this. As Lisa poured them both a glass of wine, Wendy couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. "Lisa," Wendy began, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of everything she had just gone through, "I've been thinking a lot. We've exposed a lot already, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. Diddy, Jay-Z, Oprah, they're all connected in ways we can't even imagine." Lisa nodded, looking down at her wine for a moment before meeting Wendy's gaze. "I know, Wendy. But what's our next move? People are starting to notice. And not just the public, there are forces at play here that you've barely scratched the surface of. I've heard rumors, whispers that there are others involved, people higher up in the food chain. People who could make or break us." Wendy leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "I know. That's why we have to go further. The story is bigger than any of them. We need to expose what's really going on behind the scenes, the manipulation, the deals, the dirty secrets they've been keeping hidden for decades." Lisa was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Wendy could sense her hesitation. It wasn't that Lisa didn't believe in her or the cause, they had been through too much together for that. But the stakes had escalated beyond what either of them had imagined. "But what if we're opening up a Pandora's box here, Wendy?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it's more dangerous than we think?" Wendy paused. She could feel the weight of Lisa's words, and for a brief moment, doubt crept in. But then, she thought about all the people who were counting on her, the people who had been silenced for too long, the victims of the system who had no voice. She couldn't let them down. "Not now. I've made my choice, Lisa," Wendy said with conviction. "There's no turning back now." With that, the two of them began to lay out their plan. Wendy knew that to truly expose the depth of the corruption, she had to be willing to take risks, risks that could jeopardize everything. But the truth had to come out, no matter the cost. The first step was to gather more information. Wendy and Lisa spent hours sifting through documents, old interviews, and insider tips. They reached out to former employees of Diddy's label, former associates of Jay-Z, and anyone who had crossed paths with Oprah over the years. The more they dug, the more they uncovered, dealings, secret meetings, whispered rumors. It was a tangled web, and the deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. One day, Wendy received an encrypted email from an anonymous source. The message contained a video, a piece of footage that she would later describe as the game changer. The video showed Diddy in a private meeting with a group of powerful executives, discussing how they had manipulated public opinion, how they had buried scandals, and how they had controlled narratives in the media. It was a bombshell, a piece of evidence that could turn everything upside down. Wendy couldn't believe what she was seeing. The very man she had accused of being the puppet master of the industry was caught on camera confirming her worst suspicions. She watched the video multiple times, taking notes, making sure she hadn't missed anything. This was it, the key piece of evidence that would finally expose the hidden forces behind the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. But with the discovery came a new sense of urgency. Wendy knew that Diddy and the others would stop at nothing to protect their empire. She wasn't sure how much longer she could stay in the safety of her own home, or how long Lisa would be willing to work alongside her without risking her own safety. The people who controlled the industry had more power than Wendy had realized, and they weren't going to let her take them down without a fight. As the days passed, Wendy found herself increasingly paranoid. She double-checked the locks on her doors, hired additional security, and even started traveling with a bodyguard. Every time she left the house, she looked over her shoulder, wondering if someone was watching her. She had become a marked woman, and there was no turning back. Yet, despite the growing threats, Wendy's resolve only grew stronger. The deeper she went, the more she realized that her voice was the only thing standing between the truth and the lies that had been perpetuated for so long. She couldn't back down now, not when she had the evidence, not when the world was waiting for the truth to come out. In the midst of the chaos, Wendy began to have moments of reflection. She thought about her own journey, the sacrifices she had made, the battles she had fought to get to this point. She remembered the young girl from Asbury Park who had dreamed of becoming someone powerful, someone whose voice would be heard. She had made it, and now it was her responsibility to make sure that the truth was heard, no matter the cost. As she sat in her office one evening, staring at the video footage one last time, Wendy knew she was about to take the biggest risk of her life. She wasn't just exposing a few celebrities, she was challenging an entire system that had been built on secrecy and deception. And in doing so, she was about to change everything. Wendy Williams had always been a woman of strength, of resilience, of grit. But as she sat in her dimly lit office late that night, staring at the footage once more, she could feel her heart racing, a mixture of anticipation and fear. She had gathered the evidence, made the connections, and uncovered the truth. But now, it wasn't just about facts and figures, it was about the emotional toll this fight was taking on her. For the first time since the courtroom confession, Wendy felt the weight of what she had done. She wasn't just challenging the lives of powerful men and women, she was challenging the very system that had defined her existence for decades. Hollywood, the media, the entertainment empire, it had all been built on secrets, lies, and manipulation. Now, she was on the brink of exposing it all. But was she ready for what would come next? The stakes had never been higher. It wasn't just her career at risk anymore, it was her entire life. There were moments when Wendy wondered if she had made the right choice. Could she handle the fallout? Would the world turn against her, as it had with so many before her? What if she was wrong? What if this was all just an elaborate conspiracy theory that would unravel her own reputation? Just then, her phone buzzed, shaking her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Lisa. "You okay?" Wendy stared at the text for a few seconds before typing her response. "I'm fine, just thinking. This is bigger than we thought. I can feel it." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. Should she tell Lisa the truth? Should she admit how scared she really was? She had always been the one who took charge, the one who told everyone around her to keep going, no matter the obstacles. But now, in the quiet of her office, surrounded by evidence of corruption, betrayal, and scandal, Wendy felt more vulnerable than ever. Wendy, you've got this. You've been through worse. You've always come out on top. That was Lisa's reply, as if trying to reassure her from miles away. But Wendy wasn't so sure. The truth was, she didn't know what would happen next. No matter how much she had prepared herself for this moment, nothing could have prepared her for the emotional toll it would take. It wasn't just about the danger of the powerful people she was exposing, it was about the emotional connection she had to the industry. She had once been a part of it, had once admired the very people she was now trying to tear down. She had loved the limelight, the excitement, the glamour. But now, it felt hollow, empty. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from an unknown number. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before answering. "Wendy Williams," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "You've gone too far, Wendy," a voice on the other end of the line said, smooth but with an unmistakable edge. "This isn't a game. You've exposed something that can't be undone." Wendy's blood ran cold. She recognized the voice immediately. It was one of Diddy's closest associates, someone she had crossed paths with many times, but never expected to hear from now. "I'm not backing down," Wendy replied, her voice firm, though her insides were churning. "Then get ready for the consequences. There's a lot more at stake here than you think," the voice warned. "You think you're exposing the truth? You're just scratching the surface. There are people who will make sure you never breathe a word of this again. It's not just about Diddy. It's not just about Jay-Z or Oprah. It's about people who own this industry, Wendy. You don't know what you're messing with." Wendy's heart raced, but she held her ground. "I'm not afraid of you. Or your threats." The line went dead. She sat back in her chair, staring at the blank screen of her computer. The weight of the conversation hung in the air like a dark cloud. She had been warned. This was no longer just a story about celebrities and scandals, it was a war. A war that Wendy had no intention of losing. But as the reality of her situation sank in, Wendy couldn't help but feel a wave of doubt and fear wash over her. What if the threats were real? What if she was in way over her head? What if the people behind this system were too powerful, too entrenched to ever be brought down? She leaned forward, burying her face in her hands. She had come so far, sacrificed so much. But was it worth it? A few days later, the tension in Wendy's life grew even more palpable. The media frenzy surrounding her continued to spiral, but it was beginning to feel less like an opportunity and more like a cage. She couldn't go anywhere without being followed. Paparazzi staked out her apartment, and reporters lined up outside her studio. Every corner of her life was being scrutinized, and Wendy could feel herself starting to crack under the pressure. But what bothered her most wasn't the cameras or the reporters. It was the gnawing feeling that she was losing something deeper, her sense of self. She had always been the voice of truth, the one who stood tall in the face of adversity. But now, she felt like she was being swallowed whole by the very thing she had built her career on. The lines between her personal life and her professional life had blurred, and she wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. The breaking point came when Wendy's mother, Shirley, called her. It had been weeks since they had spoken. Wendy had been so consumed by the whirlwind of her fight against Hollywood's elite that she had barely had time to check in with her family. But now, hearing her mother's voice crackling on the other end of the line, she felt a rush of guilt. "Wendy," her mother said softly, "I know you think you're doing the right thing. But I'm scared for you. Please, don't lose yourself in all of this." Wendy swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. She knew her mother was right. She had been so focused on the bigger picture, the fight for truth, that she had neglected the very things that had always grounded her. Her family. Her friends. Her own peace of mind. For a moment, Wendy allowed herself to be vulnerable. "Mom, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can handle it anymore. I've uncovered so much, but I don't know if I can expose it all without losing everything. Her mother's voice softened, filled with love and understanding. You don't have to carry it all alone. You've always been strong, but even the strongest people need support. Take a step back, Wendy. Find a way to protect yourself while still fighting for what's right. Wendy sat in silence for a long moment, reflecting on her mother's words. She had been so consumed by the fight that she had lost sight of the bigger picture, the need for balance, for self-care, and for the people who mattered most. Maybe this was the wake-up call she needed. She took a deep breath, wiped the tears from her eyes, and made a decision. She wouldn't let the fear consume her. She wouldn't let the threats silence her. But she also wouldn't let the fight destroy her sense of self. With renewed determination, Wendy picked up the phone to call Lisa. The next step would require not just courage, but careful strategy. And Wendy knew that the time had come to prepare for the final confrontation, one that would either shatter the entertainment world or rebuild it from the ashes. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weight of the world felt heavier on Wendy Williams' shoulders with each passing day. As her investigation continued to unravel the dark secrets of the entertainment industry, the walls around her seemed to close in. She had always prided herself on her strength, but there were moments now when she wondered how much more she could take. The media frenzy was relentless. News outlets were spinning their own narratives, accusing her of everything from delusion to defamation. Her name, once synonymous with gossip and entertainment news, was now associated with a scandal that threatened to destroy her career, and perhaps her very life. Wendy had always been a fighter, but even she knew that the forces she was up against now were unlike anything she had ever faced before. One night, after hours of sifting through legal documents and interview transcripts, Wendy collapsed on the couch, exhausted. The pressure was beginning to feel suffocating. She had hoped that exposing the truth would bring her a sense of relief or vindication. Instead, all she felt was a deep, gnawing sense of isolation. There was no one she could fully trust. Not anymore. Not after the threats, the lies, and the betrayals that had become a daily part of her life. Even her closest confidants, Lisa, her producer, and even her own mother, were beginning to pull away. People were scared, and with good reason. Wendy had stepped into a war that wasn't just about entertainment gossip, it was about power, control, and lives that could be destroyed with the flick of a finger. And yet, despite everything, Wendy couldn't stop. She had already come too far. She had seen things that the public could never imagine. The manipulation, the blackmail, the vast web of control that stretched across Hollywood, and beyond. No matter how much it hurt, no matter the personal toll, Wendy knew she couldn't walk away. There were too many people depending on her, too many voices that had been silenced for too long. She had to finish what she started. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. She groggily reached for it, barely registering the name on the screen. Lisa. Wendy rubbed her eyes and answered, forcing her voice to sound stronger than she felt. Hey, Lisa. What's up? There was an uneasy pause before Lisa spoke, her voice low. Wendy, I think we need to talk. Wendy's heart skipped a beat. She could hear the apprehension in Lisa's voice. Something was wrong. What's going on? It's getting too dangerous, Lisa said, almost pleading. I've been hearing rumors, whispers, you know. People who are close to Diddy and Jay-Z, people who are connected, are starting to ask questions. They're starting to come after the people around you. I don't want to scare you, but, they're watching. The room felt suddenly colder. Wendy sat up, her mind racing. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing it from Lisa made it all too real. What are you saying, Lisa? Wendy asked, her voice tightening. I'm saying that I don't think you can do this alone anymore, Lisa replied, her words hanging in the air. This isn't just about you anymore. They know you're close to exposing them. And they're going to do whatever it takes to stop you. You need to be careful. Wendy took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm that was rising inside her. I'm not backing down, Lisa, she said, more forcefully than she intended. I can't. I've already come this far. Lisa's voice softened. I know. But I'm telling you, these people are dangerous. You're playing with fire, Wendy. They don't care about anyone. Not you, not me, not anyone. It's just not worth it if it's going to destroy everything you've worked for. Wendy felt a pang of doubt, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had always been strong, always been able to face the odds. This was no different, right? She had the truth on her side. But then again, truth hadn't protected her from the threats, the betrayal, or the mounting pressure. I can't stop now, Wendy said again, her voice quieter, tinged with a mixture of frustration and resolve. I know what's at stake. I'm not backing down, Lisa. I can't. Another long pause filled the line, and then Lisa finally spoke again. Okay. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll keep your guard up. They're ruthless, Wendy. And sometimes, the truth doesn't matter. Sometimes, it's about who has the power to silence you. Wendy didn't answer right away. She didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to think about the possibility that she might lose everything she had fought for. But deep down, she knew Lisa was right. There were forces at play here that went beyond her control. I promise, Wendy said finally, though the words felt hollow. She knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down. She had to be smarter, faster, more strategic. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if that would be enough. In the days that followed, Wendy found herself in a constant state of alert. Every time she stepped outside, she wondered if someone was watching. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar phone call, sent a wave of unease through her. She had always been a public figure, but now, she was a target. Even the people who had once been her friends, other celebrities, industry insiders, and even former colleagues, seemed to be keeping their distance. The walls were closing in on her, and the pressure was becoming unbearable. Yet, despite the growing isolation, Wendy kept pushing forward. It was early one morning, as she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, reviewing the final pieces of her story, when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, cautiously, Wendy rose from her seat and walked toward the door. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked through the peephole. No one. Just an envelope lying on the doorstep. Wendy opened the door, her breath held, and bent down to pick up the envelope. It was unmarked, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in a bold, crisp font. You have no idea what you're getting into, Wendy. The truth you're looking for will destroy you. It's already too late for you. But for your sake, let it go. Wendy's fingers trembled as she read the note. A chill ran down her spine. Whoever had sent this knew her. Knew what she was doing. And they were warning her. Her mind raced, trying to process the message. This wasn't just a threat. This was a message from someone who knew exactly what was at stake. Wendy's pulse quickened, but she quickly steadied herself. The message had only one effect, it made her more determined. They wanted her to back down. But she wasn't going to. Not now. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city of New York. It was late afternoon, and the streets below were buzzing with activity, but Wendy Williams felt like she was in another world entirely, one where every movement, every conversation, every decision was under intense scrutiny. The weight of her investigation, the pressure to expose the truth, had never been heavier. She sat in her office, staring at the file in front of her. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the one that would expose everything, every secret, every betrayal, every conspiracy that had been hidden from the public eye for decades. It was her chance to take down the biggest names in the entertainment industry, Diddy, Jay-Z, Oprah, and reveal the truth to the world. But as she ran her fingers over the documents, a cold wave of doubt washed over her. She had come so far, fought so hard to get to this point, but now, standing on the precipice, Wendy couldn't shake the feeling that this was about to change everything. Not just for the industry, but for her. The phone buzzed on her desk, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was Lisa. "Hey, Lisa," Wendy answered, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "You still good?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with concern. "I've been hearing more chatter, people are saying things. There are whispers about your next move. You have to be careful, Wendy." Wendy sighed, rubbing her temples. "I know, Lisa. I've been hearing it too. But I'm so close. I can't back down now. I get it, but this isn't just about you anymore. This is bigger than you think. If you expose them, there's no turning back," Lisa warned. Wendy glanced at the file again, the truth staring back at her. She had always been willing to risk it all for the truth, but now that the moment was here, she couldn't ignore the consequences any longer. "I know what I'm doing, Lisa. I'm not just exposing Diddy or Jay-Z. This is about everything they represent, the system, the power, the lies. I can't let this slide." Lisa hesitated on the other end of the line. "Just promise me one thing, watch your back. There are people in this game who will stop at nothing to protect themselves." "I will," Wendy replied, her voice hardening. "But I'm going through with this. No matter what." The next few days felt like a blur of activity. Wendy's team worked tirelessly to prepare for the release of the story. The media was already buzzing, with rumors swirling about what Wendy had uncovered. The world was waiting with bated breath, but Wendy felt a creeping sense of dread as the hour of reckoning approached. She knew that no matter what happened next, her life would never be the same. The stories, the secrets, the lies that had been buried for so long were finally going to come to light. She couldn't help but wonder if she was ready for the fallout. As the time ticked down to the moment of truth, Wendy found herself alone in her office, staring out the window. The city below seemed so distant, so far removed from the chaos that was about to unfold. She could almost feel the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. She reached for the envelope that held the final piece of her story, the smoking gun that would blow everything wide open. But before she could open it, her phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Wendy," the voice on the other end of the line said, cold and familiar. "I hope you're ready for what's coming. You're playing a dangerous game, but you knew that already, didn't you?" Her heart skipped a beat. It was the same voice from before, the one that had warned her in the dead of night. The one she now knew belonged to someone deep inside Diddy's inner circle. "Why don't you stop while you're ahead?" the voice continued. "We've already let you go this far. But once you hit send, once you release that story, there's no turning back. You've seen what we can do. Don't make this mistake." Wendy stood up, her pulse racing. "I'm not afraid of you. I've been afraid my entire life, but not anymore. This ends now." The voice on the other end chuckled darkly. "We'll see about that." The line went dead, leaving Wendy in a cold silence. Her hand shook as she held the phone, but she didn't waver. She had already made her decision. The truth was coming out. And nothing, no threat, no intimidation, was going to stop her. The following morning, Wendy stood in front of the cameras in her studio, ready to reveal what she had spent the last few months uncovering. The weight of it all pressed down on her, but she was resolute. Today was the day. As the camera lights flicked on, Wendy smiled through the nerves, her usual confidence masking the storm inside. She had always been in control, but today, things were different. Today, she was not just delivering gossip, today, she was delivering a reckoning. "Good morning, everyone," Wendy began, her voice steady but with a sharp edge. I've been talking about a lot of things over the years, but what I'm about to tell you, this is something no one in this industry wants you to hear. But I'm not here to protect the powerful. I'm here to expose them." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. The world was watching, and she could feel the eyes of millions on her. "There have been rumors," Wendy continued, her voice growing stronger with every word. "Rumors suggest that the real power in Hollywood isn't in the hands of the celebrities you see on the red carpets. It's with the people behind the scenes, people who've manipulated the system to control the narrative. And one of the biggest names in that game is Diddy." The room went silent. The cameras zoomed in on Wendy as she went on, laying out the connections, the shady deals, the people who had been silenced. She named names, Jay-Z, Oprah, and others who had pulled the strings from the shadows. As the words flowed, Wendy felt a strange mix of exhilaration and fear. She was doing it. She was finally pulling back the curtain on the corruption that had festered for so long. But as soon as she hit send, sending the story out to the press, the phone calls started flooding in. This time, it wasn't just threats. It was worse. Her team frantically worked to cover their tracks, but the damage was already done. The story was out. The powerful people she had exposed weren't just angry, they were terrified. Wendy took a deep breath and leaned back in her chair, a sense of finality washing over her. There was no going back now. The truth was out, and no one could silence her anymore. Wendy Williams' heart raced as the hours passed, each minute dragging on longer than the last. She had done it, she had exposed the truth, but now, as the weight of her decision settled in, she realized that there was no turning back. The story was out. The world now knew everything, the connections, the lies, the dark underbelly of Hollywood. The moment she had been building toward for so long was finally here, and with it came a tidal wave of consequences. At first, the reactions came in fast. Social media erupted, flooding with comments, shares, and posts. Fans of the celebrities she had exposed were in an uproar, defending their idols, calling Wendy a liar, a traitor. The press, too, had a field day, jumping on the bandwagon, some calling her a hero, others labeling her a villain. Everyone had an opinion, and while that was expected, the one thing that stood out was the silence from the very people she had named in her story. Diddy, Jay-Z, Oprah, none of them had made a public statement yet. Wendy had expected a swift reaction, but it was their silence that unnerved her. They were calculating. Waiting. Wendy paced her apartment, her phone buzzing constantly. Each notification seemed to carry a new threat, a new piece of venom. She couldn't ignore the feeling in the pit of her stomach, the knowledge that she had just opened a door that would lead to something bigger than she had ever imagined. She glanced at the TV, which was broadcasting the morning news, and her heart skipped a beat. There, in bold letters across the screen, Wendy Williams' shocking allegations against Hollywood powerhouses. The ticker continued to scroll, citing the key points of her story: how Diddy had used blackmail to control the industry, how Jay-Z's business dealings were intertwined with shady characters, how Oprah had turned a blind eye to exploitation for the sake of her empire. But then, a new headline flashed on the screen, one that made her blood run cold. Wendy Williams under investigation for defamation and false allegations. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. They were coming after her, just like Lisa had warned. The very people she had exposed were fighting back, using their power and influence to discredit her. It wasn't just about her career anymore, it was about survival. Later that afternoon, Wendy's phone rang again. She picked it up without looking at the caller ID. "Wendy, we need to talk." It was Lisa's voice, full of urgency. "What's happening, Lisa?" Wendy asked, feeling a growing sense of dread. "They're circling, Wendy. I've been getting calls from your legal team. Diddy's lawyers are already drafting papers to sue you for defamation. And they've already reached out to some of your sponsors. They're pulling everything they can to turn the tide against you. You need to get ahead of this, or it's going to get ugly." Wendy's throat tightened as she processed Lisa's words. I knew this was coming, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. I thought I had the truth on my side. You do, Lisa said quickly, but they have money, they have power. And right now, they have the media. They're going to spin this story in every direction to make you look crazy. You have to be prepared for the fallout. I am prepared, Wendy responded, but her voice betrayed her. She wasn't sure if she was. I've been fighting my entire career for a moment like this. I'm not going to let them shut me down now. Just remember, Lisa warned, the higher you rise, the harder you fall. This isn't just about you anymore, Wendy. They'll come for everyone around you, too. Wendy bit her lip, trying to keep her emotions in check. She had always prided herself on her resilience, her ability to stay composed under pressure. But this? This was a war. And it was starting to feel like she might lose everything. I'll be fine, Lisa. I've been through worse, Wendy said, forcing a sense of calm she didn't quite feel. But I'll need your help. I'm going to need my team to be rock solid on this. Of course. You're not alone in this, Wendy. We'll fight this together. But, be careful. I don't like the way things are unfolding. Wendy paused, staring at the window as she listened to Lisa's warning. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red glow across the skyline. It felt like a sign, like the calm before the storm. I'll be careful, Wendy said softly. But I'm not backing down. The following days were a blur of press conferences, legal meetings, and endless media scrutiny. Wendy had become the most talked-about figure in the entertainment industry, with her name dominating headlines across the world. But the attention wasn't always the kind she had hoped for. Her phone rarely stopped ringing. Reporters, bloggers, and legal teams from various sides wanted a piece of her. Fans of the celebrities she had exposed were angry, calling her every name in the book, accusing her of trying to ruin their heroes. Even some of her closest friends in the media world seemed to distance themselves, hesitant to align with someone who was so openly at odds with the powers that be. In the midst of all the chaos, Wendy began to feel the loneliness creeping in. She had made the decision to go public with the truth, but now, as the backlash hit full force, she found herself standing on an island of her own. And then, on the fourth day after the release, it happened. Wendy was sitting at her desk, reviewing a legal document when a notification popped up on her phone. A new video had just been posted on social media. It was a statement from none other than Diddy himself. He was sitting in a sleek, dimly lit office, the camera focused on his stern face. His eyes narrowed as he spoke, every word dripping with disdain. I've been watching these rumors fly around, Diddy began, his voice calm but icy. And I want to address Wendy Williams directly. Allegedly, she thinks she can ruin me with lies. Well, let me tell you something, Wendy. I've built my empire on truth. And I won't let anyone, especially someone like you, tear it down with baseless accusations. Wendy's stomach churned as she watched. She had known it was coming, but hearing it straight from him made everything feel that much more real. This wasn't just a media battle, it was a personal attack. If you think for 1 second that I'm scared of you, you're wrong. You've made a big mistake, Wendy. And I'm going to make sure you regret it. The video ended, and Wendy sat frozen, her mind racing. This wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. Diddy wasn't backing down, he was launching a full-scale offensive. She had expected retaliation, but the cold fury in his eyes made it clear, he wasn't just protecting his brand. He was sending a message. Wendy sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. A sense of determination settled in her bones. This wasn't just about her reputation anymore. It wasn't even about the story she had uncovered. It was about something bigger, the fight for truth, for justice, and for her own survival. She had started this war. Now, it was time to finish it. The walls of Wendy Williams' apartment felt closer than ever. Every ticking second on the clock seemed to echo in her ears, and she could almost feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her. The days had blurred into one long, unyielding stream of pressure, fear, and scrutiny. Her phone had become a constant companion, never once silent, always buzzing with messages, calls, and notifications. The attacks were relentless. After Diddy's public statement, things escalated quickly. His legal team had served her with a defamation suit, seeking millions in damages for what they called false and malicious accusations. Jay-Z's team wasn't far behind. Lawyers had begun to flood her inbox with threats, warning her of the devastating consequences should she continue to pursue the story. And Oprah. Oprah, too, had entered the fray, issuing a statement condemning Wendy's claims as irresponsible and divisive. The media was in full swing, too, split between those who labeled Wendy a hero and those who took the side of the titans she had exposed. Yet, amid all this chaos, Wendy couldn't shake the sense that something more was at play. It wasn't just about the lawsuits or the media. It wasn't even about the powerful figures she had taken down. This battle, this fight for the truth, had become something far more personal. Wendy sat in front of her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her latest blog post was ready to go, but she couldn't bring herself to hit publish. This time felt different. She had always been able to face the camera with confidence, delivering her stories no matter the cost. But now, each word she typed felt like a bullet aimed at her own future. Suddenly, the phone rang again. It was Lisa. "Wendy, you there?" Lisa's voice was strained, filled with urgency. "I'm here," Wendy replied, forcing herself to sound composed. "What's going on?" "You won't believe it," Lisa said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're digging up your past. It's all over the tabloids now. Your ex-husband, your old feuds, everything is getting pulled into the spotlight. They're trying to ruin you, Wendy. They're coming after you from all sides." Wendy felt the blood drain from her face. "They can't. I thought they'd go after the story, not my personal life. They're doing both. And they're not stopping. You've become the enemy now, Wendy. The narrative they're pushing is all about destroying your credibility. They're calling you unstable, obsessive. Everything that has ever been said about you is being thrown in your face. I'm so worried about you." Wendy closed her eyes, running a hand through her hair. The truth she had fought so hard to expose had turned against her, and now it seemed like no one believed her. She had never felt so alone. "I didn't think it would go this far, Lisa. I thought they'd just fight back with their lawyers, not bring all this personal stuff into it," Wendy said, her voice low and filled with disbelief. "It's not about the truth anymore, Wendy. It's about silencing you. And if they can break you down, they'll do it. I'm telling you, you have to be careful." Wendy stared at the blinking cursor on the screen in front of her. The story had already caused enough damage, enough chaos. She had uncovered the truth, but now she was paying the price in ways she hadn't anticipated. But there was no going back. The world was watching, and Wendy had made her choice. "I'm not backing down, Lisa. I've come this far. I'm not going to let them destroy everything I've worked for, everything I've built. I'm fighting until the end." Lisa was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I just hope you're ready for what's next, Wendy. You're about to face the worst of it. Just don't say I didn't warn you." As Wendy hung up, the tension in the room was almost suffocating. The world outside seemed to be closing in on her, and for a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Was exposing the truth really worth all of this? But then she thought about all the people who had been silenced, all the stories buried beneath layers of lies. What about the victims who had no voice? What about the future of the industry? Wendy had always believed in the power of the truth, and she had seen too much to turn back now. Her conviction was stronger than ever. She had come too far. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. Her legal team was frantic, trying to prepare for the impending lawsuits, but they couldn't predict the full extent of the storm that was coming. Wendy had always been a fighter, but now, the fight had escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. She found herself sitting alone in her office late that night, staring at the blank page before her. The darkness outside mirrored the heaviness she felt inside. Then, the door to her office creaked open. "Wendy," a voice said softly. Wendy turned to find her assistant, Karen, standing in the doorway. She had a worried look on her face, holding something in her hand. "I got something for you. It's from one of your old contacts. Someone who's been watching what's happening," Karen said, stepping into the room and handing Wendy a small envelope. Wendy hesitated before taking the envelope. She ripped it open, and inside was a single, handwritten note. "I know what you've uncovered. Don't let them break you. You're on the right side of history. The truth is coming." Wendy stared at the words for a long time, her heart pounding. The note was cryptic, but the message was clear. She wasn't alone. There were people out there who believed in her, who knew what she was doing was right. It was enough to give her a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in days, Wendy felt a small flicker of hope. The storm was far from over, but maybe, just maybe, she wasn't fighting it alone. The following day, Wendy went live with a new statement. She was calm, composed, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The camera focused on her face as she spoke directly to the millions watching. "They want to break me. They want to make me out to be a liar, a fraud. They're digging into my past, using anything they can to discredit me. But let me make one thing clear, I'm not afraid. I know what I've uncovered, and I know it's the truth. No one can take that away from me." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You may not like the truth, but it's time for it to come out. You can try to silence me, but you can't erase the facts. Not anymore." The camera cut to the reaction of her fans. Some were cheering, others were skeptical, but Wendy knew that the battle was just beginning. That night, as Wendy closed her laptop and prepared for bed, her phone rang again. She didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. "Wendy," Lisa's voice came through the line, shaky with emotion, "they're coming for you, girl. They're really coming for you." Wendy's hand tightened around her phone, but there was a new strength in her voice. "I know, Lisa. But I'm not backing down. Let them come. I'm ready." Wendy Williams had been through countless challenges in her life, public feuds, personal heartbreaks, and professional hurdles that many would have crumbled under. But this? This was different. This wasn't just another scandal or fleeting controversy. This was a war for her life, her career, and her very soul. For the past few weeks, the pressure had mounted steadily. Every corner she turned, every move she made seemed to have a consequence. Her phone was now a lifeline and a prison, endless calls, messages, and notifications, each carrying more threats, more warnings, more doubts about her future. The media had picked up on every misstep, every mistake, twisting them into accusations of hypocrisy, of lies, of obsession. Her legal team was working around the clock to defend her, but even they could sense the tide was turning. Diddy's legal team had filed more motions. Jay-Z's representatives were relentless, threatening more lawsuits and even criminal charges. Oprah, the one person she had never imagined turning against her, had become a looming shadow in the background, making calculated moves to distance herself from Wendy's accusations. The people she had trusted, the allies she had thought were standing beside her, were now scattered, some in fear, some just hoping to avoid the fallout. And then, there was the media. The industry had rallied against her in ways she had never anticipated. But even so, Wendy wasn't backing down. The embers of her resilience had turned into a full-blown fire. She wasn't just going to let them tear her apart. Not now. Not when she had come this far. It was the middle of the night when Wendy received the message. She had just finished another round of interviews with her legal team when her phone lit up with a single notification. She picked it up, expecting more bad news, but what she saw made her pause. It was from Lisa. "Wendy, we have a problem. Someone's been leaking information about you. I just got a call from one of your former producers. They've been feeding the media personal details about your past. About everything. And they're using it to make you look unstable, like everything you've said is just a desperate attempt to stay relevant." Wendy's hands trembled as she read the message. She had known there were whispers in the shadows, but this was the first time she realized just how deep the conspiracy against her went. They're not just trying to shut you down. They're trying to destroy you. If they can paint you as crazy, as obsessive, as unreliable, your entire story will be dismissed. It'll be over. Wendy slammed her fist onto the table, feeling her anger surge. The message felt like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just the accusations she was facing now, it was a calculated, coordinated effort to obliterate her credibility. If they could get everyone to believe she was losing her mind, they could bury the truth she had uncovered. She glanced at the clock. It was almost 2 a.m. She knew she couldn't afford to sleep now. If she wanted to stay ahead of this storm, she needed to act. The next step would determine whether she walked away from this fight or became a casualty of it. The following morning, Wendy made a bold decision. She was going public again, this time, with everything. No more subtlety, no more careful wording. It was time to reveal all the cards she had been holding back, the ones that could change everything. She knew it could either make or break her. But in her gut, she knew it was the only way to move forward. She called her legal team and gave them the news. "I'm going live," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "Prepare everything. This isn't just another interview. This is the final stand." By noon, Wendy was standing in front of the cameras once again. The studio lights were harsh, the tension in the air palpable. She had been through this 1,000 times before, but today felt different. There was a sense of finality in the air, like the last breath before a storm. She took a deep breath and stared into the camera, the weight of her words settling over her like a heavy mantle. The world was watching, waiting for her next move. The chaos of the past few weeks had culminated in this moment. She could feel the pressure mounting, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Wendy had become something more than a television personality. She had become a symbol of resistance. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "You've all heard the rumors, the accusations. You've seen the media circus, the endless lies and distortions. But today, I'm here to set the record straight." She paused, letting the words sink in, knowing full well that every eye was trained on her. "For the past few weeks, I've been under attack. I've been called a liar, a fraud, a troublemaker. They've tried to discredit me, make me the villain of my own story. They've tried to tear me down with everything they have. But let me be clear, I am not the villain here. And I will not be silenced." The room was silent. Wendy's eyes shone with a fierce intensity. She had made the decision to go all in, to expose the people who thought they could control her and her narrative. For those of you who think this is about personal vendettas, let me make one thing clear. This is not just about me. This is about a system that has been rigged from the inside out. A system where the powerful get away with murder, where truth is twisted and buried, and where people like me are silenced when we try to speak up. Her words struck a chord with the audience, but Wendy wasn't finished. "I've spent years in this industry, seeing things I can't unsee, hearing things I can't unhear. I've been on the receiving end of the manipulation, the lies, and the games. But I'm not afraid to tell the truth. And if that makes me a target, then so be it." Wendy took another deep breath, feeling the weight of her statement. This was it. There was no going back. "The truth is simple," she continued, "Diddy, Jay-Z, Oprah, they are not untouchable. They are not above the law. And if I have to be the one to shine a light on their actions, then I'll do it. I won't stop until the truth is out there for everyone to see. No one, no matter how powerful, should be able to hide behind their wealth and influence. She sat back in her chair, letting her words hang in the air. The silence was deafening, but it was a silence she welcomed. Because now, the world knew. The truth was out. The aftermath of Wendy's statement was immediate and intense. Social media exploded, with fans, critics, and conspiracy theorists all weighing in. Some rallied behind her, supporting her unwavering stance. Others dismissed her as delusional, still convinced that she was simply a disgruntled former celebrity trying to stay relevant. But Wendy knew one thing: she had put it all on the line. She had spoken the truth, no matter the cost. As the weeks passed, the legal battles continued, but Wendy found solace in the fact that she had made her stand. She would fight tooth and nail for her right to speak, for her right to expose the truth. And whether or not she won this battle, Wendy knew she had already won something far more important: her integrity, her voice, and her belief that sometimes, the truth was worth fighting for, no matter the consequences. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?